Good evening. Welcome to the Ashland Planning Board meeting of January 26th. We are in the Selectmen's Meeting Room at Town Hall, and this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on WACA Public Access, and thank you for that. On the agenda tonight, we will be starting with a discussion of the bus parking at 11 to 13 Chestnut Street at about 7:30. We'll continue with the site plan review for 60 Pleasant Street. This is the Gamewell building, as it's known. At 8 o'clock, we will have a continuation on our public discussion of the Rail Transit District preliminary subdivision. Also, tonight, we'll be discussing authorization for the expenditure of mitigation money on the Upper Charles River Trail master plan, and we might have a brief update at some point on the House Street landfill. With that, let's start with the bus parking off of Chestnut Street. Would you like to introduce the topic?
Sure. Some guys, many of you know that the Michael J. Connolly bus parking, they park their buses off of Chestnut, which are lots 10, 11, 13, and then 75 Chestnut Street, and then 13, 12, 10 Brook Street. Some neighbors are concerned, and they've asked to speak to the planning board.
Okay. If people would like to talk, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, because that gets included in the minutes.
Hi, my name's Elaine Kelly. I live at 18 Columbus Ave, which is adjacent to I'm not even sure if they're the Brook Street parking spaces that I think the bus is in the process of buying or has bought. I have lived here since 2009. I have my two little friends here with me to assist me. We moved in. It was a quiet neighborhood. When we looked at the house, it was on a Sunday. It was lovely. We saw the buses in the backyard. We came for a home inspection on Monday around 10. Great. Everything was wonderful. We moved in July 1st. Everything was great through the summer. September comes around. We have 40 buses driving up and down our street, 6 o'clock in the morning. Actually, it's probably before that, because somebody starts up at 5:45. They go on starting their engines, testing out their safety signals, which we understand is great, make sure everything works properly, and that goes through probably until about 6:30 when the last bus pulls out. And then again, they all leave. They get back into the bus yard around between 9:15 and about 9. And then it starts again with all the cars racing through our neighborhood to leave. We're a neighborhood of 13 houses. Let's say everyone has 2 cars, it's 26 cars on our street. With the buses coming in, buses coming in and leaving 4 times a day, we have the drivers exiting and entering our neighborhood. It's almost 160 extra cars a day if all of them are doing it. I'm not saying all the bus drivers are bad when they leave. There's a good 6 that race through our neighborhood. I can list the cars, the descriptions of the cars. We've asked them to slow down. I think Sergeant Berman spoke with me on last Tuesday, said he had spoken both with Hopkinton and Ashland Dispatch to get the drivers to not come through the neighborhood. And then perfect example today. I've been away for a week, so I'm not sure how bad it's been. They're digging in front of our house for the water project that's also going on. And the backhoe's in front of my house digging with barely enough space for a car to get through. And sure enough, the white Charger that loves racing through our neighborhood comes flying down and almost hits the 2 workers that are there digging. Now, from my front door to the corner, maybe it's about 20 feet, 30 feet at the most. And the speed that he's coming down the street, on top of that being the corner, but then having a backhoe right there, and he has no concern for slowing down. Our new concern now is the buses now moving behind my house. We know they're where they are. We hear them. It's loud, but it's doable. But if they're right behind my house, it's not going to be a good partnership. It already isn't with them being on the other side. And with them purchasing the new parking, and bringing more buses in and bringing more friendly bus drivers to race through our parking lot, through our neighborhood from their parking lot, isn't going to be safe. It already isn't safe. And it's hard to believe that the people who are coming through our neighborhood are actually driving our children. I also have a letter here. I don't know if I should just hand it to you. This is from the neighbor that also abuts the backyard. It's 14 Columbus Ave. And he has the same problems. He has 2 little kids. He has concerns about buses parking back there. He's almost been hit by the bus drivers exiting work in their cars, almost having near misses, backing out of the driveway with them racing down and nearly hitting him. And I can see most of our neighbors are here, and everyone has a similar story. We have one neighbor who actually hit a bus, and then we have another neighbor who has been hit by a bus. Because the second half of the problem is when we leave, if we happen to come down Brook Street during any time that the buses decide they're exiting, they don't stop. They just make a parade coming out of the parking lot. They don't stop, they don't look, and it's scary. It really is scary. I have 2 kids. A lot of my neighbors have kids, and it's just an unsafe situation. And then to tell us that you're going to bring more buses. And then the other issue we have is we know the buses are fueled there. My house backs up onto the second parking lot. Whenever that parking lot rains, snows, all the water from that parking lot then floods my backyard. So if we're going to have buses in there being maintenanced and fueled, and all that is now going to run into my backyard, on top of the diesel fumes from the buses coming into my yard, our standard of living is going to be brought way down, and I'm sure our property value is going to be brought down a pretty good amount. Somebody pulls up if we decide to sell our house, and they get to see 80 buses in our backyard. I think we have about 38 maybe there now. I can't get a close count. I don't want to stand there and count them all, but I know Ashland has 14, and I think Hopkinton has about 25. So we have about 39 buses there right now, and they're not good neighbors. So I don't know how allowing them to bring more is going to assist us. I know I have other neighbors that have other concerns as well. Do you want the letter?
Yeah.
From the other neighbor? He couldn't make it. He's going to be out of town for a while, so. And then I guess you're going to talk about the permit?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll let one of my other neighbors finish up, but.
Oh.
Were you good?
You can pass those out if you want.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you made copies.
Ray Trainer, 8 Columbus Ave. When I moved into town, which was 1957, there were no parking lots. There was just one, up in the corner, which was the executive parking. All those other lots were houses. When the General Electric people came to us, I remember my father sitting there. Those parking lots were designed and permitted, which I don't think anyone's got a copy of the original variances and permits, as employee parking of it was General Electric at the time. Now I don't know what they call it, Ashland Technology Center. The parking lot is an ancillary use of the main structure, what's permitted for. Now, if these school buses, they're not employees of the original, what it was permitted for. Oh, that's at least what I remember I was sitting in the kitchen when the guy told us that. Traffic on the street's always been a problem. They made Brook Street one way at one time. We've gotten to the point when my father used to just pull trucks out in the street and just leave them there to block it off so the cars couldn't go through. Well, apparently that issue's reared its head again. Now, as far as fueling the buses, I've got pictures of it. They fuel them in the wetlands. There's no emergency action plan registered with anybody that I know of. They don't even have a bag of Speedy Dry. How this has been allowed to go on for so long is beyond me, that the conservation people haven't been up in arms about this. And then they plow all this snow into the brook, which we all know you're not supposed to do that either, but that's irrelevant. So the question is, how can they be permitted, since this school bus is now a new use of the lots? It's not employee parking. This is a whole new business that they want to put in there. And has anybody looked into I believe it's the Mass DEP on the air particles because they're talking about bringing in more buses. There's currently 45 there now. If they bring in another 35 or 40, you're now going to have 100 or so buses in there, or close to it. The diesel emissions, I mean, Linda, who lives on Brook Street, I don't know if she's here, the plumes of smoke that go on her house is just, I don't know how she's put up with it, but she has, that's up to her. But to back them up to the fences, it's unheard of. I mean, it just, I don't know how you could possibly allow them to do it, and/or have they applied to run a whole new business for what the land was just, permitted for originally. So, you've got to prove to us, is there some statute or bylaws about bus parking in town where it's a whole new business? That's all I got to say. And, and I didn't even know about the meetings. Do they normally send out notices or something about this type of meeting, or?
But I'll explain the history and
Okay.
my understanding of where we are. So what happened is you are correct that this was listed as employee parking for the Telecron building, now the Ashland Technology Center. The school buses have been parked there. They had a rental agreement with them to do that. To the best of my knowledge, they never applied for any permits through the town.
Not that I know of.
So I am unaware of it, and it just sort of happened as far as the town is concerned, and nobody really noticed, so it never went through any of the reviews that it should have gone through.
Nothing.
I don't know if there's any legal grandfathering by you've got an unapproved use, but you've been doing it for 20 years. I'd have to ask town council on that.
Well,
So I don't know
unfortunately,
I don't know what the status of that is legally.
That falls on you guys.
But
or somebody in town.
what has happened recently is this past year, the bus company decided they didn't like having a rental agreement that could be pulled. They wanted to actually own their own land. So the owner of the Telecron building came to us and said, we want to change the lot lines and create this, where the bus parking is a separate lot so we can sell that off. And we reviewed the parking needs for the Telecron building and decided that, yeah, without that parking, you've still got more than enough parking for your use. So we allowed them to sell off that part. So that's now a separate parcel unrelated to the Telecron building.
Yep.
Which potentially could trigger some of this, give us a chance to rectify the fact that it had been employee parking that had been misused, whereas now it is a separate parcel and they're trying to run a business without going through the proper permitting process, site plan review, conservation review, possibly a special permit depending on whether the use is allowed, which would be a ruling by the building inspector. So hopefully we can do some of that. With the conversations about traffic safety, that is ultimately for the selectmen to handle. The selectmen are in charge of the roads. The planning board gets involved if we're creating a new road. It occurred to me, and then you mentioned that it used to be that way, of making the road one way might reduce some of the problems. It was one of the first things I thought of. I see they've thought of that before. If there's, I had heard there were problems of people in buses cutting the corner, and a thought I had is on Tilton Avenue, where they've got that corner that lots of people drive as a cut through. There are about 2-foot tall boulders right around on the edge of the corner, so people will not cut the corner onto the property because there are boulders there, but they're low enough that they don't obstruct visibility. So that might be something if
that takes
that's
care of the
part
traffic issues, but it still doesn't take care of, is there going to be any kind of restrictions put on them as to where they can park the bus?
Yes, we do need to have a conservation review and a site plan review of this use, and I don't know what the proper procedure is for the town to force that.
Yeah.
Any other comments? I'm sort of dominating.
That's fine, you're doing good.
Yeah, okay.
You're on a roll,
You're doing
go.
great.
All right.
I support, I believe it's a change of use.
Yes,
that we need to look
I
into.
agree with that.
Yeah, so I believe the building inspector is the zoning enforcement
Right,
officer.
so
So
he'll determine
we
that
could
change.
ask the building inspector to look into it.
Yep.
The building inspector does not report to the planning board, so the planning board would not have that jurisdiction. Another avenue you could consider is the Board of Health, and I'm kind of laughing because I see a member behind you. The Board of Health, the diesel fumes, any pollution is potentially a health issue.
Plus, they far exceed the state and federal idle regulations of 5 minutes. I think it's 5 or 10.
5,
Five,
yes.
yeah.
Well, they're
I've
way
looked that
beyond
up,
that. It's
yes.
usually a half hour.
Well, are there different rules? There are that many buses parked there? Is that classified as a truck stop? And don't they fall, is that something completely different?
I don't know on the legal classification.
Because I can't find anything on Ashland in truck stop zoning, because there is none.
There
So
is
this is
none.
the first one, so I'd love to see some rules on this, because
But-
it's a lot of buses for that area. Like I
But-
said, and they're not great neighbors.
Because there's fueling, I believe the fire department should be interested in that.
And they were fueling
huge.
this morning, so.
Yes, so
they do actively fuel there. Some people say
this-
yes, they do, and some people say
This
no,
should
they
be
don't.
brought to
They
the
do.
attention of the fire chief. This should be brought to the attention of the building inspector, and this should be brought to the, and-
Right.
Who makes that, who brings those to those
So,
people?
I have to the fire.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, I'll get that.
and the Board of Health, I didn't speak with them about the fumes at all, but the fueling is allowed, and that's monitored by DOT. So the fueling is supposed to happen by a licensed truck that is prepared for a spill. So that's allowed, so that's something that they'll need to supply. And I can't remember what I was gonna say. But they are close to the wetlands, and so that might trigger something of where on site they can do it. So that would be part of the review.
So, I mean, all
Right,
of it, I think
right.
is, we pay the insurance for it, so.
yeah, they,
Hold on, Mike, you want to talk?
any use within a floodplain may require a special permit. So that's another thing they
Yeah.
might, and that'd be a planning board special permit. So they may need a special permit from the planning board because of the floodplain.
And Preston, on the snow storage, what are the factors around the snow storage?
Usually that's conditions under site plan review, which they haven't done, as far as I know. So,
Certainly
A lot of issues.
pushing snow into a brook is not under
Right,
the regulation.
So
No.
Right.
I guess, I think you've given a lot of good insight as to other avenues and avenues that can go. Where can we take it from the standpoint of saying change of use needs to trigger a site plan review? Because a subdivision of a lot certainly does not give permission for a bus depot.
Right.
So now that it's owned and operated by a bus company as a depot, I do believe it needs
Yeah.
to come in front of the board.
normally what happens when somebody wants to operate a new business is they end up having to apply for a building permit. And that causes the building inspector to come in, review the zoning, and then usually, and he may deny the permit saying, you have to go and get site plan review, you have to get a special permit or whatever. So that's how the zoning enforcement is normally triggered. Because they are not actually constructing anything,
Right.
they never applied for a building permit, so it never came to the attention of the building inspector.
Correct.
But the building inspector could still go out there, look at it and say, this is not an approved use, and issue a cease and desist order saying, you have to get these other permits before you're allowed to do this. So I think that would be the avenue, and I think the planning board would encourage our planning director to undertake that.
All right.
Judy Margulies, I'm a member of the Board of Health, but I am speaking only for myself as an individual. Obviously, I was not aware of this, but I did want to just comment that what I would recommend is actually one of the things that they should be doing is write a letter to the Board of Health to request any health reviews of this, because the powers of the Board of Health are quite extensive in terms of anything that would affect the public health. And I'm not clear as to this particular property, so I can't speak to what has happened in the past, but subdivisions actually are also one of those things that are supposed to be reviewed by the public, by the Board of Health. Here in Ashland, it's my understanding, though, that oftentimes things do go to tech review, and that process actually doesn't trigger necessarily a Board of Health review. It's actually a process that's an employee process under the Board of Selectmen, is what I understand generally. But so I recommend that anyone who believes that they have anything that has a health-related thing, that they address it directly to the Board of Health and request it to be discussed from a public health perspective. And that's boardofhealth@ashlandmass.com. Thanks. Oh. And one other thing, all those other kinds of things, do feel free to reach out to the Conservation Committee, because they deal with a lot of the water things also. And although I'm not on that committee, I know I go to a lot of those meetings. So there are individuals there who may be able to.
Yeah. Sheila, I know the conservation agent's desk is like right next to your
Oh, yeah,
office. Is she aware?
They're aware of it, yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Steve Mitchell. I serve on the Board of Selectmen, although I am not speaking on behalf, but I would encourage you to come to the board and express your concerns. I think we are as the chair described, we are the road commissioners, and so we have certainly a duty to respond to this. We also, and you mentioned speaking to Ed Berman, Ed chairs the roadway or the traffic safety committee, and that's our mechanism. We created that maybe a year and a half ago, and that's our mechanism to deal with situations like this. So, again, I encourage you to come to the board and describe your concerns. And then I would also suggest that the school committee or school department has a connection here relative to the the company that they've hired to transport students. So I think that's another avenue. I don't think there's anybody here from the school committee, but I think that's another avenue as well. And what's very concerning is if there's an employee that is racing through a neighborhood and it's a chronic situation, then there's got to be a mechanism to deal with that. So the selectmen, we meet the first and the third Wednesdays of the month. We have a meeting next Wednesday, the 1st. Typically, we have citizen participation at the very beginning. Certainly appropriate for you to come and discuss this. All right, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Sergeant Berman has been to some employee safety meetings, so has been talking to the bus company.
So so going forward,
Yeah.
if you have a discussion with the building inspector and something starts happening, how can we let the residents know what is happening, what has, who's looking at it, what agendas it's on? Is there some process that we could?
Well, when there's a formal review, like a site plan review, or if they're going for a special permit, the neighbors within 300 feet of these parcels will be notified. But in the meantime, the sort of what's happening to follow up, maybe I'll just put an email list and people can put their email and I can send it out. But you're welcome to contact me as we figure out the finer points of the process.
All right. Mark?
Yes, Steve, Mark Sony, 49 Hawthorne Road. This situation it's not the first time it actually came up, but it's the first time that the neighbors have actually spoken up. And it's worth their time because they live there. It is known when they come out of that parking lot that they line up and queue up at the lights at the intersections. And that's another hazard because they blind people on the inside corner coming up making those turns. The diesel is 5 minutes island, and the fueling up is it is part of Board of Health, but it's also a DOT and it's EPA says it's environmental. I'm looking at it saying some of those buses, you can talk to the Ashland School Committee because they contract for the Ashland students. But there are Keith Tech buses and Hopkinton buses that are in that same parking lot. And that parking lot is what the municipal access before schools started to expand and more students came into the town. Now, when they did the construction on Chestnut Street by the Wildwood Cemetery and the pipes going in, that was empty and it was non-traffic, but now that it's refixed, it has resurfaced. For the neighbors, citizens, who are your voters and the ones that put you in your seats, puts the selectmen and everybody in their seats, it's a lifelong hazard, lifelong concern. But if they live in the town long enough, that Mr. Colbus has, and know that that square brook and the other old clock, I think it is, around the two parking lots was one way and was a dead end. So there'd be no access going out either way to 135. Now it's backed up, and it's back in their livelihood up in the parking and the diesel fuel, all that stuff. It's their living quarters, which they shouldn't live in humble, bold, peaceful, and safe conditions. All those buses and the school committee who contracts those buses for the Ashland students to find out how many is Hopkinton buses and how many are Keith Tech buses, weed them out. It may not be too much to separate, but it still would happen, but it'd be a little less traffic at the time once they can weed those two districts out. But they have to live, they should live in an air-free, congestion-free, EPA-safe living conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All right, I think that's about all we have on this. Anyone else have anything to say? We will try to get some follow-up on this, get the building inspector to look at it and other officials.
Yeah. And please leave your contact information.
Yeah, I'm gonna-
And we can get back to you with anything.
I know I'm going to. Sorry, this is going to be very hard. My name's Karen Araya. I live at 7 Columbus Ave. I actually work for this company. I am a school bus driver in Ashland. My issues, and this has been brought to, I work for the water department also. I have gone to it was Dave Minucci, Roy, spoken to them about this stuff. I walk to work. I live right down the street. My children used to walk with me. I've worked for the buses for 20 years, 18 years for this last company. I worked for the company that was there before that. I have spoken to police. I've had drivers on my property. I went out I take my son to the train at 6:15 every morning, and every morning there's a car flying down our street. One time I was pulling out of my driveway. I couldn't even get the car and drive before this lady went on my property, drove in my driveway and on my grass. Buses, I've spoken to both supervisors. I've spoken to the company before. This is very hard for me, okay? These buses pull out of the bus yard, and I'm going to, I am there. They are running sometimes 15 minutes when there is frost, but 99% of the time they're doing the 5-minute roll. I work for Ashland. My supervisor knows all this, spoken to everybody that works on the Ashland side. These are the Hopkinton people that are doing this. They pull, Brook Street is a street. These people get out of their car, go on a bus, and pick up children, but yet they fly into a street without even looking. As she said, there were 2 accidents with buses.
I have a video of 3 of them pulling out without even stopping. This is morning, noontime, nighttime. We don't have traffic from, people cutting across. We have traffic from the bus drivers. I have spoken, like I said, I've been to the police. I've spoken to selectmen, older selectmen. I have been fighting this for 20 years. I'm harassed when I walk down the street. Drivers are stopping and saying, saying things to me. I have to go to work and I have to listen to people say, you can't tell people to not drive down your street. I don't. I ask them to be respectful and slow down. We have children. I have 3 children. I have a child that still lives in my house, and not a child anymore, but driving. When my kids are driving, I worried about them leaving every day. And every morning, 6:15, I leave my house and I take my son to the train. And I do not go down my street to go to the bus yard. I go through the light. And it's the same thing there. They pull onto Chestnut Street without even stopping. These people have been told by their supervisors to stop. They choose not to. I don't know, it angers me. I work with these people. My neighborhood is being harassed, and it needs to stop. They put a stop sign. Have Connolly put the stop sign. If these people do not understand what stop means, make it big. I don't care. We shouldn't have to suffer with a one-way street or a dead end or anything like that. We pay our taxes. We should be able to drive up and down our street safely. When I'm in somebody else's neighborhood, I respect them. We're only asking the same thing.
Thank you. We will definitely follow up
Yeah.
with, and make sure this is looked at. This is a problem that should not be left as is.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's move on to the next item.
I'm just gonna put the sign up.
The next item is a continued site plan review for 60 Pleasant Street. This is traditionally known as the Gamewell Building, more recently the United Home Experts Building. So we'll start that in 1 minute or so, as I see some people
Coming and going.
yeah. So. All right, 60 Pleasant Street. Do you have anything to say before the applicant gives the status?
No, I guess not.
Okay.
Let's see.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jerry Efron for the applicant, 60 Pleasant Street LLC. Following our last meeting, we were tasked with certain assignments, and we did them to the best of our ability. I made a submission on the lighting and noise issues. Our engineer, Joe Marquardt, made a submission on the drainage and on the propane shielding issues. We also had, since that time, a meeting with the Conservation Commission and several additional conversations as a result of that meeting. As a result of those last 2 items, it has become an issue that we may have to face a significant potential redesign of the drainage system. We don't know that. We literally have information that is of fairly recent origin. That information has to be studied, and once it's studied, it'll be determined, frankly, how it affects the drainage system as designed, and if, in fact, it can be done. If it can be done, then we would proceed and come back and go forward and finish. If it can't be done, we would have the alternative of trying to redesign a drainage system that works, and then seeing if the project could work with the way and the parking area expansion is designed, or whether or not we'd have to come back with a potentially drastically revised project. The information that we need to do that requires some analytical work, and then some potential additional work by others besides myself and the engineer, and it's going to take a period of time to do, unfortunately. This information was developing and was developing as recently as later this afternoon and this evening, which I think the board is aware of. As a result, unfortunately, I think it makes more sense, rather than to have the board review the things that we filed, form opinions and ask questions of them, that we're going to be seeking an extension and an additional meeting, probably for at least 30, 45 days, because it's going to take the work of both the engineer and others to do the studies and analysis to see how much of a reworking of the drainage system is going to have to be done.
Okay. Before we continue this, I actually drove by there on my way to this meeting and drove down the street on the side. One of the issues was the lighting impacting the neighbors. And what I noticed is there appeared to be 4 different doorways on that side that had lights above them. And the second doorway, the light had a shield in front of it, so the light did not come out to the street. The first one does not, it's pretty much right on the corner of the building. There's no shield on it, and there's enough gaps in the arborvitaes there that you see, you were seeing shadows on the street, and it plainly, I could see why a neighbor would be concerned about that. And then there are 2 more on down that don't have shields that are probably not impacting the neighbors so much, but that first one probably needs a shield.
I don't know what your nomenclature is for first and second, but part of the filing here was essentially an indication that in order to effectively shield those lights, that we literally hired a fabricator, and the fabricator was installed, and we provided some designs, was going to do some shields that would essentially conform to the standard. So we don't disagree with you.
Okay, so
but for the reservation, if I don't know what you mean by first and second, we have it.
That's fair.
That's it, yes.
So you're planning on doing some work there, and it hasn't happened yet?
That is correct. And
so
the
we're all
work-
on the same page.
And the work will not involve simply buying off-the-shelf products. It will involve customizing a shield that will fit over the existing fixtures that will basically prevent light spillage.
Okay. And is there any comments from the board before this is continued? Or are there any residents who wanted to talk about this tonight, since we're here? I'll give you an opportunity.
Hi, Jacqueline Astro Hathaway for the homeowner, Mary Spinazzola. That's great. We're just asking requests that if that can be done, if the lighting is going to be addressed forthwith, and hopefully the changes will be done and before the next continued hearing.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Not within our jurisdiction to require it, but it would be nice.
Just to be noted, if that could
Yeah.
just be, a reasonable request that we've done. Thanks.
What's the request?
That the shielding on the lighting be installed.
Be done before the next meeting.
Be installed
Soon.
properly.
Before the next.
Preferably before.
On all 4 lights, or
3 remaining.
the 3 remaining?
Any that are impacting the residents. It's vague at this point.
Okay.
All right, so if this is going to be continued, we only have the 1 meeting in February, so this would be to the first meeting in March?
March, yeah.
So we normally have 2 meetings, but we're not meeting on school vacation week.
So this ends, we're up February 15th. So we're on to March 9th or March 23rd. 23rd.
Okay, and then we would want a continuation, an extension through March 30th, which would give us time, if we do a decision that night, to file it through Thursday of the next week.
I'll supply it tomorrow.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept their extension to March 30th? Moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. And since this is a public discussion, not a public hearing, we don't have to set the time. So we,
23 for the hearing, right?
yes, so we will
Yes, so
continue this
continue.
till March 23rd at a time to be determined. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's also 5-0. So we are continuing. All right. Thank you very much. Let's see, looking at the agenda, the big item remaining is the Rail Transit District preliminary subdivision. That was on our agenda for 8. It is only 7:55. So I'd like to take a minute and talk briefly about the House Street landfill solar project. I was in town hall and got pulled into a meeting the other day on this. So I want to inform the public of what I learned and inform the board and also tell people some of the things I said there, just so it's nothing's hidden behind closed doors. I would have told the board earlier, but I can't tell the board except in open meeting. So the meeting was discussing several issues that they have. One is dealing with gas leaking out of the landfill and some remediation that has to be done. And another was about how the interconnect lines run to the Instar Eversource lines. So I'll address the second part first. Our site plan, they had specified they wanted to add 3 power poles pretty much right in the center of the project so that they could pole mount the transformers and whatnot as they interconnect with Eversource. And Mike had said that he really wanted these pad mounted, which means a pad, it means a piece of like concrete on the ground, and then you put the equipment on that, and that way you don't have to put new poles. And what they found is where they looked at putting the pads, they said, well, there actually is trash underneath that area, and Eversource said, we won't touch pads when there's trash underneath it. It's not stable, there's a risk of gassing and gas interfering with the electricals. I don't know the full story. They basically said, we don't want to do that, and so they're back to looking at power poles, and but instead of putting them right in the middle of the project along House Street, they're now looking at the northern end of the project, which puts it near trees, which makes them a little less unsightly, but it's still not optimal. And so what I told them in this meeting was that my opinion, because the decision said that they couldn't put up power poles without the approval of the planning board, was that because Mike is our power expert on the board, that if they convinced him that they were doing the right thing, that the rest of the board would probably go along with that. That's my reading of the political tea leaves. And subsequently, they contacted Mike directly and have had some discussions with him. So that's what's going on with the power. And before I turn it over to let you say anything you want to say about it, if there is anything, the problem with the gassing, apparently they've found some gas is leaking out of the landfill towards House Street. I don't know the exact details of where the gas was detected and whatnot. Apparently this is completely unrelated to the fact that they're putting this project in, that both the existence of the gas and the detection of the gas are things that would have happened completely independent of this. That's what I was told. the remediation is that they are going to put some sort of interception pipes or something in there. And what they're going to end up doing is digging a 15-foot deep trench to install this just on the far side of the sidewalk from the street. And that goes pretty much where they're supposed to put the berm. And that's why they haven't finished the berm yet and finished the landscaping. So once that work is done, and I'm not clear on exactly who is doing the work and what the plan on that is, but hopefully that will be done in time so that this spring they can do the landscaping and actually make the roadway, the roadscape, look nice as was promised in the original plan. So that's where we are. Mike, do you have more to comment on the power side?
You did a good job of explaining it. I'd say, in their test holes, they found trash beyond the cap under the soil. They found escaping methane gas. In order to put a pad mount on the property, essentially the pad mount, as you said, is a concrete mount that is hollow on the bottom, and they run the wires up through the bottom of the pad mount. The utility will not approve the pad mount going through trash where there's escaping methane that could fill up this box where the electrical connection is. Right, makes sense. There are some other options, potentially putting pad mounts on the southern end of the site, which is pretty far away from the interconnection point. May not be feasible if there's trash and methane on that end of the site as well. They did talk about installing poles along the northern tree line, and it would limit it to one interconnection pole needed on Howe, right on the street. Other than that, we also talked about some flooding. People that have lived in that area have seen an increase in water runoff on the northern end of the property, right where they've trenched and done some other stuff. We've had a pretty wet winter, so they are looking into that as well. So more to come. Hopefully they come back with some ideas and potential solutions.
Their plan is to come back February 9th. Neighbors should get notice next week, so 300 feet of the property, those neighbors will get invited to the meeting, and then of course it will be on the agenda as well.
Okay. Do you have a comment on this?
Yes, I do. My name is KG Nair, and I live in 49 Thomas Road in Ashland. I'm also a member of the Board of Health. I'm speaking myself as an individual member, not as a part of the Board of Health. I do recall before I got onto the Board of Health, there was a meeting here to clear the Hovey Street. Some permit was required by them to get it from the Board of Health. I think at that time they had allowed, I believe, 6 to 18 inches on the top layer for them to tackle with it. The rest of it was still under the control of the Board of Health to take their permission. If they're digging 15-feet trench, shouldn't they come back to the Board of Health for taking care of this aspect?
Yeah, I believe both the trench and if they put in power poles, that goes below that 12 inches, so that would also potentially go back to the Board of Health
Yeah,
as
it
well
will,
if they
yeah.
move forward with that plan.
So that you wouldn't move on clearing unless they get through the Board of Health, I presume. Is that right? Thank you.
It would need to go through the Board of Health to.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, because
Yeah.
it's below that threshold.
Mr. Chairman, is this a lined landfill?
I don't
I don't know.
know. It's capped.
It's
I don't know if
capped.
there's a line. It's totally lined. There's trash outside of the capped area though as well. So
How's that possible?
No, they're proposing to dig a 15-foot deep trench through the landfill,
outside of the cap.
outside of the cap.
Between the cap and the sidewalk.
There is trash there.
Help vent.
And if they dig up trash, it'll go somewhere else. But- Mark?
Yes, Mark, so again, I've been up at that site basically once a day since the groundbreaking. And the first thing is that methane gas leak. It was discovered about halfway through putting those panels on the surface. And then the neighbors across the street said they were starting to smell some fumes coming across. I in turn, as once was told, came to the town hall, the Board of Health, talked to Mr. Oram, told him about it. He talked to EPA. He talked to the schools, because Amoresco is a package deal with the school, the contract with the high school projects and stuff like that. So they all have to be notified. What happened is they had a work stoppage, and they have to stop because it's called methane gas. And yet, there's been utility poles brought up to the side of House Street. Measured, almost put up, but didn't put up, they got utilities on box poles. To put the poles on that surface where it is, those panels are, I don't know if it's EB or DEP rule, you can't go 12 inches or more below the surface because of erupting or disturbing the gas that's down there with the extra trash and all that stuff that's there. So, to do that, you would have to get an inspector up there to make sure that ground is going to be safe not to put the pole in. And Eversource and the Amoresco company who put boxes of 26 connections up there has got to see that before they actually put the pole in. For the gas, the methane gas, very first thing that's got to be remedied before any pole hits the ground.
Yeah, you mentioned the new poles that I've noticed one of them lying along the side of the street.
Yep.
I was told that those are not actually related to this project. That Eversource is in the process of replacing the lines and the poles on House Street in support of the Legacy Farms development in Hopkinton. So it's in the same area, but I was told that it's actually not related, which was a surprise to me.
That's a big surprise to me, seeing it's Hopkinton's responsibility after the poles are there.
Well, the utilities don't stop at town lines.
No, but you gotta get permission to go on different town streets before you actually put them up.
They're replacing the existing poles.
But it doesn't make a difference, it's still town to town. Jurisdictions could be different. People who live on the streets may wanna know that a different town is putting out poles.
Hopkinton is not putting up poles.
Well,
Eversource is.
Eversource
has the right to take their poles and replace them as need be for maintenance or upgrades, and that's what they're doing.
In the request of Legacy Farms in Hopkinton. We're not living in Hopkinton.
Judy Margulies, I'm a member of the Board of Health, but I'm here as an individual. I'm not exactly sure what to say, but I guess I'm encouraging everyone, whether it's you or anyone watching, to communicate better with individual members of the Board of Health, because there seems to be a communication issue. The things that you know, we don't know. And that's a problem. And I hope that we as a community can address that more effectively so that the Board of Health is involved in these things via communication. And I'm just going to leave it there, because this whole discussion, whether it's this one or the one before, is just like truly overwhelming. I mean, in terms of we as a board can only be effective if we have the tools. And if we're not given the information, we can't participate. So I just wanted to say that, because someone got up, I think it was Mark here, he said, Mark Oram, Board of Health. Well, I'm frustrated there, okay?
Do we have any, like, was this an engineered cap, or was it just
Yeah, the
is
town
there an as-built for it or anything? Do we know? Are we opening a can of worms? Do we know?
The town has done all kinds of work on this over the years.
I remember when it was built, when I was a little kid.
It was recapped not many years ago. They fixed the slope for drainage purposes and did some work out there. There's a lot of records on it, certainly.
So at the time, there really wasn't much regulation as far as what people dumped in landfills. digging a 15-foot trench is concerning to me. I don't know if that falls under our purview, but
I don't think so.
I don't think so
Doesn't,
either.
the landfill
No.
falls under the Board of Health.
It's the Board of Health.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Amoresco's gonna come next time, and they can explain more.
and
Yeah,
if it was an engineered cap and we know exactly where everything is and it was as built, as builted or whatever, be a little less concerning, but
I'll try to gather that information for the next meeting.
All right, well, let's move on to the Rail Transit District preliminary subdivision.
Justin, I just wanted to make a comment on the as-built plans. If I
Okay.
recall, one of the conditions in the site plan approval was that they were completing the as-built plans on the cap because of the financial impact to finish the as-built plans. So you can look that up, but I do believe
Right.
that is part of the decision. Is
That sounds
that
correct.
Amoresco was paying to have as-built plans completed.
as-built plans of the
cap.
With the
of the
cap.
cap.
Because we had recently regraded, and we had not filed them as a town due to the cost, and they were going to do that as part of this project. And I don't know where that sits. You can certainly
Yeah,
see if those monies have been paid.
All right. Magunko Transit District. Like to introduce where we are tonight?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates, civil engineer representing the applicant, Mr. Robert Gaynor of Magunko, who is not present this evening. When we left you a couple of weeks ago, we had had a good discussion regarding the preliminary subdivision on this property. We left the board with some information, and as I understand it, the board wanted some time to contemplate the plans so we could reconvene here tonight and talk about how we move forward, whether that be an approval with some notes and conditions that we will take into our definitive, whether that be a denial with notes and conditions as to why it's denied, or I think you can elect to also take no action on it. And, you know, we'll start there. We gave a brief summary, or I guess we gave a pretty in-depth summary, and we had a lot of good public comment regarding the application. And I will remind the board, and obviously the members of the public that are here tonight regarding this land, is that we are only here talking about, you know, creating lot lines. It does not, in and of itself, create a project. We're not discussing construction of townhomes, regular homes, commercial projects, et cetera. That would stem at a later date based on the allowances of the Rail Transit District and the covenant that's in place with the town.
Okay.
Thank you.
And an update from me. Since the last meeting, I wrote up a summary of what I thought some of the planning board findings might be, which I sent to Sheila, and she incorporated into a draft decision. Town council met with us yesterday morning, went over those. Some of the language and stuff that I had written got wiped out because I'm not a lawyer, so everything I say isn't always legal, and that, you know, so that's why we have lawyers to check those things. One thing that town council did make clear was it really doesn't matter whether we approve or deny this. That either way, they can go forward with the definitive plan, and it has no bearing on whether they lock in their zoning. The nice part is also, because it doesn't make a big difference, it's not something they would have any reason to appeal, so there's no concern of the town getting into a lawsuit if we choose to deny it. It would simply be a statement from the planning board that we think there are significant problems with this, and, you know, so we're really free to do that, which in many cases on something we aren't really free to do a denial. So that is a a little different from what I relayed at the previous meeting. So I believe we all have a copy of a draft here, and that's really where we are. Oh, and I have a affidavit from Mike Moki saying that he has reviewed the video from the meeting, the previous meeting, and is now up to date and able to participate. So,
Just 2 copies, actually. One for comment
these-
on the file, and one for the applicant, if you wish to have it.
I don't know how we sign that in. So, how would the board like to proceed at this point? We want to, comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a disclosure.
Yes.
That I was a Mr. DeSoni had previously brought up that it might be a conflict of interests for me to vote on this issue, which I disagree, but I'm going to make a disclosure that I was a former member of the Ashland Citizens Action Committee. I will review these plans like I would any others, based on the bylaws of the town of Ashland and the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Okay. As long as you feel that you're not biased in this, and you don't have a personal interest in it, then you are not legally required to recuse yourself on this. Good. All right. So I don't think there's anything new as far as the plans or anything from last time.
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. We did have an occasion to speak with Ms. Page between the 2 hearings, that she had made reference to a couple of ambiguities on the original plans that we were certainly able and willing to clarify, but we elected that we'll certainly address it as part of a definitive. Mr. Gaynor had provided her an email which outlined the ownership of the property, which illustrated his ability to file the subdivision on the land. That is all. No physical changes to the plans, though, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, he submitted, it's in, Mr. Gaynor submitted a document saying that Magunko Rail Transit has adopted Ashland Rail Transit. It's not notarized or recorded, but I wanted to let you guys know, you gentlemen know that he submitted that, and I believe it's in your notebook under section 3. And he submitted that in response to one of the comments at the last meeting.
Okay.
So I guess if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I got a few things that I thought the town comments were excellent. I think there was good conversation around this project, and I know this is only a preliminary subdivision of the lot lines and some proposed roads, but I did want to comment on a few things, and I do have some concerns about the subdivision of the lot lines that I guess I would like to know more about. And the first thing I kind of wanted to do was read some of the intentions of the Rail Transit District, and I'll put it into context as I get through it to see if these lot lines make sense to kind of meet that standard. But you know, in our bylaws, it says the purpose of the RTD district, right? And it talks about providing a coordinated high aesthetic standard for development of high technology research. It talks about development, incubator establishments, offices, and at the very end it says multi-unit housing and age restricted. Right? The way the lot is drawn up, I thought we really needed to see the areas that overlay it. So those that aren't familiar with the RTD, it's divided into 6 different areas that allow different uses per area. I feel that, and it goes on to actually talk about the district will encourage originality, flexibility, and innovation. When I look at this, it looks as though it's being subdivided strictly to fit housing in here. Right, so there's a lot of, I know what you have written aside, right, because I know that's just conceptual, but it seems like dividing up these smaller parcels, the way we're looking at them, it's really pointed to how much town housing can we put in here, and where can we put it? And I think, you know, where the town is today from where it was in 2000, I would like to see the lot lines developed in a way where it still leaves the option open to encourage these commercial uses and these research uses. And I don't necessarily believe all of the divisions, the way they're drawn up today, would do that, or at least where the roads will be placed on the map. I think they failed to kind of interconnect some of the key lots. It kind of leaves you with a lot of wetlands and areas that will be really hard to develop the type of development we'd like to see. It doesn't encourage any of those commercial uses being close to the actual rail station itself, so people can commute and get there and really make this a low-impact development. It really looks like it's just focused on how can we get houses on the flatter, drier land and kind of leave the open space in the wetlands for potential commercial uses in the future. I just don't see the innovation here, and without having more on the site plan, it's hard for me to visualize it with just some roads. Certainly it's the applicant's prerogative not to you know, disclose now where you guys are headed, and you probably don't know everywhere you're headed. But I want to make sure when we divide these lots and we put roads in, we are not essentially cutting ourselves off from encouraging the kind of development we need or want as a town. And so I think that's something that we just need to consider when reading the uses and where they are. And I don't know if you guys, I know these maps came out today. If you haven't had a chance, the uses are laid out. They're very detailed as far as what's allowed and not allowed in certain areas. Certainly the picture has some misrepresentation compared to even what's allowed, but I know that's not to be used as anything more than a visual for us. But it does give you an idea of where the roads are and what would be built around those roads. One of the things I wanted to touch on is the dimensional requirements in 8.4.6, where it talks about the lot areas. The way this is laid out today, number 6 of that area requirement is really, really confusing to understand. It talks about only counting 10% of the wetlands as usable land. So you have to essentially do a calculation of how much wetland do you have in a lot minus 90%. You multiply that by 10% for open space. There's another bullet in here which is kind of contradicting, but lot coverage on number 10 says you need 30% of the lot covered by open space. So you start to do these calculations in some of these divided lots, and do they really meet a buildable lot anymore of 30,000 feet? I don't know if they do. Most of them look pretty large, but without having the wetlands and stuff determined on these plans, it's hard for me to say how much of it's truly buildable. And the roads you're proposing, where you leave them off, you know, where does that leave us for buildable land or frontage along those pieces of the road? So that was a concern of mine looking at this, not knowing more information based on what was in front of us. I'm not against the Magunko Road extension. I kind of like the idea of using Magunko Road and connecting it to our downtown. I think we need a connection to our downtown. I don't know if it's feasible. I know there's some wetlands beyond that, but I would like to see that somehow connected into the development and being a through road and no longer even need to be a dead end, right? So we're talking about a waiver for extending an already extended dead end road to potentially put an office park or whatever may go down in that area. I'd like to see that almost go right through and be able to really open up some more development on the lower half, or at least give another egress in and out of this development area. I have, reading through the bylaws, I also have a lot of concerns about the Cherry Street connection. And if we look at 8.4.12 on the miscellaneous standards, number 4, it calls out specifically special attention should be given to the location and number of access points to the streets, general interior circulation. There's a spot where it says, hold on 1 second. thought that was the bullet I highlighted, but it wasn't the rest of the sentence I remember. Oh, an arrangement of the parking areas and safe and convenient, and that do not detract from the design of the proposed buildings or neighboring properties. So when I talk about the access to the streets, I know there was some concerns about the lot lines in that area, how close it may be or may not be to some existing properties, how it would impact the dynamic of Cherry Street, the town uses of the park down there. So I do have a lot of concern about the Cherry Street road, whether it's necessary or not. And I don't know, without that road, does that make those two lots unusable as well? So those were kind of some of the high-level concerns I had that, some of them, I guess, were already spoken to, but I wanted to also say them because I didn't have an opportunity. Another thing we talked about during phase one, and I know you're on the bike trail committee. Certainly, I had always thought, and it's explicit in the bylaw, that we want this to be a commuter-friendly area with trails. We had always talked about the trail system connecting downtown through these lots somehow. And, the way these roads are laid out, I would like to see Mr. Gaynor or, the engineer kind of lay out a conceptual idea of where we would have buildable land to put trails or a greenway or some sort of path to connect to our downtown. Because that was always the vision of this project. And if we're just saying we're putting some roads in here so we can find buildable land, what does that leave us with? So anytime we're dividing lots, I'd like to know that moving forward. Areas of the RTD designation, so we have that in front of us now. Talked about the accuracy, you guys covered that pretty well. Improving roads. I guess also the general impact of the developments by themselves without knowing what's going into them. It's tough to quantify, certainly. It's also tough to understand if the road is appropriate for the type of use you're going to put there. Knowing that a lot of these areas allow commercial use or they allow assisted living, right? Some of them say assisted living or research technology. Well, they could have, drastically different needs as far as access to those lots and parking for those areas. So, just seeing this laid out without a little more thought placed into it, I'm struggling to say I totally think this is approvable at this time. Certainly, I'm open to discussion on some things, and if you guys are willing to modify things or talk through them, from what I hear, you don't need our endorsement anyway at this point. But those will be my concerns even moving into any other phases as we move forward. So,
expressing our concerns is really one of the major purposes of having preliminary plans. So good.
Well, and he hit on all the points I was going to make, so it was the same thing. I'd thought about that. The way it's laid out, you're kind of isolating a couple of those lots are completely away from the transit. And, if there was a way to connect, and McGunko Road, I thought the same exact thing.
It's really clear, when you read through the bylaw,
Yeah.
what kind of the desire for this was, right? High-end, aesthetically pleasing, low impact, light commercial, shops, stores, high-end housing. That's not where I'm seeing this headed by dividing it up in such a manner.
Any other comments from the board, or we covered it this time?
I think Mike did a great job covering it. I also have significant concerns about the proposed Cherry Street access on the site, and I strongly as well agree with Mike in terms of leveraging McGunko to try to provide access to the site. What we see here, I know it's just theoretical, but again, it doesn't look innovative to me. This looks like any other development I've seen in the state of Massachusetts, right? Mr. Gaynor, in the previous meeting at the end, highlighted that this is a special district. It's one of the few in the state and one of the first in the state. I'd like to see some thinking around this that kind of hangs in accordance with the bylaws of what the town has in regards to the zone. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be done, and I certainly don't think it's this. And I'd like to see, something away from the concept of townhomes and a supermarket, because we already have a lot of those in town. And frankly, I do also agree that for this to be successful and to achieve what the bylaws indicate, I do think that connecting future development down into that rail line and making it accessible and connected, I think that's an important concept, because people aren't going to take the train to Ashland and then walk 3/4 of a mile up a road to some office. I mean, it needs to be really thoughtful and put together, and I just don't see that in this plan, or translating that into lots, as hard as it is to interpret. I just don't see it.
And my other concern was on the traffic with, if you put a road on Cherry Street and then Magunko, depending on what they have down there, and then there's the train crossing, certain times of the day, that's just gonna be a mass of traffic situation. If there's a train guards are down, Magunko Road is it's backed up past Magunko Road, and depending on what's there, I mean, there's a lot of traffic issues that I'd have to see with the way it's laid out. But like you said, if the road was accessed and went through, then there's more than one way out.
Okay. So I think probably the way forward at this point, I'd like to give the public a chance to comment, and then we could go over the draft decision, basically read through the different findings, and probably pick a few apart, maybe add one or two, and have a vote. I think would be where we're at. So if anybody from the public has comments, you come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and let us know what you're thinking.
Hi, I'm Peter Potoff, 50 Wilbur Drive. I'm in Square 19 there, and a butter of the property. So Mr. Moki was kind of walking through his description. It's clear that there's some other documentation that he's looking at beyond what's in this picture that talks about what possible uses of the lots are. Is that available in the public record anywhere?
Yeah.
Is it possible to get a copy of that from the
Sure,
website, perhaps?
It's online,
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
GIS. I can send you the
If
link.
you Google Ashland RTD use map, you'll find it.
Could you add this map and a copy of the covenant on the property to the co-urbanized page for this project?
Sure.
I would
That-
put
Have
the
the
table
cover-
of uses as well.
Sure.
Maps, no good without it. For some
Yeah,
reason, they're in separate
so
places.
part of the difficulty
Well-
in considering this as an abutter is this picture provides absolutely no context for what these lines represent, as you very well described. So having whatever it is you're looking at that suggests what some of the possible uses are would be very helpful.
If I may, I
Please.
believe, I hope I'm correct on this, that looking at where Wilbur Drive is, you're probably most concerned about the part of this near your neighborhood. And my understanding is that that portion is designated for age-restricted housing. So it'd be a 55 and over for townhouses and the like. I could be mistaken on that, but that's my understanding.
That's my understanding as well.
I don't know what our town bylaws are regarding the height of such housing, but
It's all spelled out in there, in the bylaw. So
Okay,
it's
that's
2
fabulous
stories, I
then.
believe, and that is area B. on the map.
It's
We're not talking big apartment buildings like the apartment complex.
Right. I'm relatively new to this process. I came to the selectmen's meeting last go-around, who suggested we come here and chat with you folks. And one of the questions I asked them, and they said, you are the guys who sort of ultimately have the responsibility for this, is some of the aesthetic considerations of what gets built.
And anyone who's had occasion to drive up a high street knows that there are some very large white buildings standing in people's backyards where there had been nothing but trees before. Now, one understands that it is private land and it is being developed, and that makes a certain amount of sense. On the other hand, it seems to me that it could be relatively simple to make these buildings blend a little more into the environment other than having them either sided white or painted white. You know, something that would blend in a little more. And obviously, you know, for my personal concerns, something that is 2 stories rather than 4 stories is certainly much more appealing. The other question that I asked at the selectmen's meeting that you might be able to shed some light on was, you know, what sort of a buffer is anticipated between the boundary lines and the actual development? I believe there was a number quoted. Does anybody remember that? 100 feet. Is that an accurate number? So it matters where you are in the district.
Okay.
So on the top half where you're talking, there's actually a buffer area called Area A. I don't know the exact width of Area A, but Area A is essentially undevelopable, if that's a word. So you can't develop Area A for anything other than, I think, daycare or sewer, parks, right? So it's pretty limited on what can be built there. And then it goes into Area B, which is age-restricted housing. So there is a significant buffer there, and that is an area where I know Mr. Gaynor has worked with the residents to put some improved easements in there. You can go to other parts, though, and I believe, depends on what area you're in, but it's 30 feet or 50 feet, depending on the areas you're in. So it could potentially be 30 feet or 50, depending on where you are within the development and what type.
Is that on this map as well, the indication of what that A and B areas are and what their offsets are?
So if you have the bylaws, it gives you a whole table for each of the areas. And
Right.
it's a long list, and it shows you what's allowable. Yeah, so if you get the use map, and
So
you have...
2 of them together will give you a picture.
Yeah, they give you a good sense of...
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Joel Arbeitman, Woodridge Lane. In your last discussion on this topic, I was watching it on TV, and a resident came up and asked about whether there would be a formal notification process for subsequent discussions, and as best I understood the response, it was normally done only for the first meeting. This may or may not be correct. And I am sure that's absolutely, you know, within the bounds of the law that you're citing, that, you know, that there needs to be a preliminary notification, for the residents within 300 feet or whatever it is. I was very happy to hear our new town planner, Ms. Page, to the residents who were discussing the bus parking lot say, you know, if you'd like to contact me, or if maybe I could start an email sign-up sheet. I would love to see us go beyond the legal requirements to do everything we possibly can to notify anyone at all, who, even if they don't even live in Ashland. If you want to be notified, we have a little list here, you sign up. When this topic comes up, maybe we start a bulletin board, or maybe there even is a mechanism on the website. I know they have some things like that, although I find it mystifying to understand how to do it. But anyway, it would be great. It would be great to have that as our sense of how to communicate with residents. I think that'd be better. You know, we can go. We don't just have to adhere to the law. We could do better than what the law requires. The other topic, I just want to really thank Mike Mokey, because that was, you didn't say anything I disagreed with. That almost never happens. That was very good. I really appreciate, not even that, even if you didn't get to that. I appreciate that. But I do want to bring up the topic of planning. You know, some have raised, and I don't need to get into it, the discussion about, you know, why do we get this preliminary plan at this time? And some have speculated, whether it's accurate or not, that this may have been triggered, the timing of it, let's put it that way, in response to the new rate of development bylaw that was passed at town meeting, and that this is an opportunity to kind of get in under the wire. Well, maybe that's the case, maybe it isn't. But what sat behind the town meeting's vote in favor of that bylaw was what? That we wanted, I mean, this is right from the town manager who spoke to this issue, we wanted time to be able to do more planning in our town, planning. And here we have a preliminary plan, and my understanding is there will be a definitive plan coming along in whatever, 7 months I've heard, or whatever the time frame might be. And my question is, what planning do we plan to do, or is it all done? There's nothing to plan here. I'd love to see, we've got a comprehensive planning committee, we have a strategic planning committee, we have a town planner and an assistant town planner, we have a planning board. They all have the word plan there. And I'd like to, I always find us in a kind of a reactive mode. We talk about how much traffic could go onto Cherry Street, how many cars per hour, and we get tech reviews and traffic engineers come in. Why don't we study that now and start to learn what the capacities of this site are? I understand there's covenants, there's co-urbanized, there's all kinds of data out there. And there's certain legal constraints as to what we can and can't do. But it seems to me that this is probably the most critical parcel of land in the entire town. I can't think of anything that rises above it. And I'm asking, is somebody planning what the possibilities are here? Are we planning how many office buildings might fit on the site and how many jobs would be created and what the benefit to the community would be? Or are we just going to wait till the applicant comes in and take a look and see if it's legally okay and we'll just go ahead with it? Why don't we plan that and put out a document? We've got 7 months. Maybe we can't do 100% of the job, but we could do some of it. It just seems to me like I would like to see us be proactive rather than reactive on a site plan by site plan process. That has to happen anyway, the site plan review. But I think we could do better with the planning process, and I'd love to see us do that. Last piece is on this Magunko Road and connectivity thing. Part of the plan, because I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I have no plan. That's the bad news. If you open up Magunko Road to the access road, which has all kinds of pros and all kinds of cons, one of the things you're going to do there, or two of the things you're going to do there, one is, how do you get to Magunko Road? If you're commuting and you live up either you're cutting through to go to Legacy Farms, out 135, you come in down Myrtle Street, Badger Road, Myrtle Street, or you're trying to just get up to the new apartments, you're going to do what? You're coming down Badger Road, you're going to turn right at Pleasant Street at the light, and then you're going to go take that left turn onto Tilton Ave, which is not meant to handle this kind of volume. I mean, you can't view Magunko Road in a vacuum. It's part of the whole traffic flow of downtown. Who is studying that? If we talk about the very valid point of having multiple ingress and egress to the rail transit district, those are good things to consider. But you've got to look beyond that. It's not this project, it's not this applicant. There's other roads and traffic flows being affected. And I think that should be studied. This is a good time. You have time now. This is the time to look at that. And then the last point is that Mike mentioned the trail. I'm not sure I fully understood the proposed road or exactly where it was located, but I want you to know that one of the considerations that we've made thus far, there's no definitive plan for the trail. In fact, we've recently hired a consultant, we'll talk about that later, to study where would be the best location for this trail. One of the places, because there's been such a strong emphasis put of trying to connect the trail to the downtown to help stimulate commerce, is to come down from the rail transit district around the cap, and there's an existing trail there, and down to Magunko Road. And the concern that I have, it doesn't necessarily preclude a trail, but if that's where they're planning to put this kind of extension that's been talked about in the preliminary plan, that may or may not preclude allowing the trail to get through there. There are sections where there's kind of water on one side, and it's pretty narrow through there, and I don't know whether putting a road in there might preclude using that as a trail. It would have, all of that would have to be studied. I guess that's about it. And Cherry Street, one last thing. I think one of the things I think it's important to keep in mind in the road layout is if you ever had a real catastrophe, and this does happen, you hear these things on the news, a train carrying toxic chemicals crashes into the platform at the Ashland train station, and you've got to get people out of there. And you say, well, we have an emergency exit, but you may not be able to use that emergency exit. It may be too close to the train track. So what is the plan at that point? Everybody has to be pulled out of there based on some volume of future use of the property and go down the same egress. I mean, there's one egress right now. And I think that's part of the planning process, is to understand, what is the maximum capacity to get people out of there in a reasonably foreseeable contingency. And, the concern is with one road out, maybe there's got to be some kind of limit there. And Cherry Street just doesn't seem like a really great, maybe as an emergency exit it might be feasible, but it just seems like the road can't handle that kind of volume. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Atherton from 155 Cherry Street. I spoke 2 weeks ago, and I said I would follow up on a couple of comments that I made. So my major concern is really the road access off of Cherry Street. And I did a lot of thinking about this and a little bit of research on the bylaws and the zoning issues and things like that. I had some information when I first moved into Cherry Street about 5 years ago, that someone had attempted to put in an access road next to the house that I live in. And I believe the issue that it was, the basis for its denial was that there was a lack of proper frontage, because the property goes like this and then it expands further back. But I've had a lot of difficulty, even though I know how to read blueprints and I have some background in development and all the rest of it. I have trouble from their maps to what I know of the properties along Cherry Street, because I did a lot of research on it and I had my property surveyed. And it has a lot to do with the connections between Magunko and the access road off of Cherry Street. So let me see if I can explain it. There is a Magunko Road when you go further back. If you walk it and you take a little bit of a left, you go along a sort of a back road where there's a lot of trucks and supplies and so on. Then you hit my property, and there's a small old road there, but it goes around the bottom of the pond. But my property goes into the pond. So there is a road, an old road there. And I know because the kids use the snowmobiles back there and they're not supposed to. But if you go along the access off of Cherry Street, which is directly along my property, when I looked at the map, it's 602 feet all the way down, which is exactly the length of my property. So there is no access between Magunko and the Cherry Street access. As Mike had said, there's literally two divisions. So my concern there is, how can you, and the comments that were made, how can you provide for access in an emergency? And is it really a convenience or a necessity? And do you really have room to put in two roads, going to and fro? If you have this kind of, where is it connected to? Is it just for development, or is it going to connect to that other road off of the other access? I can't remember whether it's A, B, and C. But it seems to me that the plan to expand the Cherry Street one has some underlying reason that I'm not aware of. And then it led me to looking at the political boundaries. There is nothing that connects the ownership of the properties with the lots, the political boundaries that we saw 2 weeks ago, so that I know where the location of my property and my neighbor's properties are to Magunko Road, to my property, and to the pond, because I literally have the bottom of the pond. Not the cap, but the bottom of the pond, going to Cherry Street. So my concern there is, if they really need another access road, isn't there a better way to do it? To take a look at it, and maybe the planning board has some ideas on that. But not off of Cherry Street. Maybe the access is from the other side, not Magunko, but the other side. So I think it needs to be looked at more carefully, because you don't have proper frontage, and I'm not sure what it is, but if my lot frontage is about 100 feet, theirs is about half. It doesn't make sense to me from a road development process. So those were my major issues. And then today I noticed that there are trees that have been marked with green tape across the road on Cherry Street. And I wondered if maybe there are plans to expand Cherry Street. because they are directly across from where you would put in the road. And they're the big tall trees, and they're marked with green tape as if they're gonna come down. They're there today. So that also raised another set of issues for me. So, let me just summarize. I can't match up the properties, underlying properties, with the plans, because I can't find that. And even if you go to the, online to the maps and everything, there's no way to connect them unless you can do an overlay, one sheet on top of another. It seems to me that the road access it cuts off the idea of this special rail transit project. And I think the project has some benefit, especially if you're talking about assisted living and commercial access and all these other things. I think that could be a very positive thing, but done right, in a proper manner, from a building perspective. And then you want to make sure that these properties that are abutting it, and there are properties that seem to, mine isn't the only one, there's another, I think, couple of acres that are in the middle of those political boundaries as well. So unless you can tell that, there's ownership issues as well. So I raise those questions as a positive, if they can be looked into, and you can come up with some, maybe different ways to access what you need down there. You don't have to do it off of Cherry Street. You could try other locations. I think you have a better access coming from the other road or Magunko than you do from coming off of Cherry Street. And on a personal note, no matter what they do, if they put a road in, it literally will totally abut my property, my fence. Because the old driveways, both are non-conforming lots, so the driveway next to me, right behind the fence, literally is about 2 feet from the fence. So that does, affect land value and property value, which I would be concerned about. So I have more questions than I have answers, and I'm not sure, how that translates into whether you decide or not to, but I think they're good questions for going forward for a definitive plan.
Yeah. I had not heard anything about any changes planned on Cherry Street. I don't know anything about the marking on those trees. Do you?
Eversource is, yeah, they're working on it's their 4-year maintenance plan. So they're marking the trees now. It's going to be submitted to DPW for review.
Yeah. Well, some of them are leaning forward, and I figured there's probably some damage. Some are old.
Yeah.
And yes, they are checking, because they're doing all the pipe checking as well.
Oh,
of
okay.
homes.
Yeah,
they're
some
doing
are,
that. Okay.
yeah. And up on, it's happening all over town.
Okay, all right. But the other questions, I would love some answers on some of the other questions, so that at least we have informed ability to make some comments.
I think we'd like the answers as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
President, I just wanted to make some follow-up comments. I will say, I do believe that the applicant has a right to develop this area, and it will get developed. And area boundaries, looking at the map, C, D, and E are I would say they're the most liberal in the uses that are allowed, right? And that covers the most land within this development. I think during the first site plan, when we approved the first development, or the modification that we had in front of us, we had always talked about looking for a way to potentially connect at some point to Pleasant or High Street, or to put another type of road in there that would give that secondary access from another point into this development. I mean, that's something that I would like to see kind of brought to us here. Right? I know there's certainly going to be opposition to it. I actually say, when I think this is going to get developed at some point, that I ask everybody and all the residents when they come in, what we really need to do is try and get the best product we can have here and the right type of development in this development, and bring those kind of comments constructively along with our environmental concerns and our traffic concerns and everything else as well, so we can help lead the development. I think the roadways are certainly going to spider out, right, as they develop out these parcels. But really, the big issue you have here, in my opinion, is what is the secondary major route in and out of the RTD? Because we don't have one right now, and we're confined to that one access road. So I think the other comment I wanted to make, without the Cherry Street access, lots 1 and 2 would not have the needed road frontage or to be considered viable lots. So they would not be,
From the perspective of a subdivision, right?
to subdivide them as lots. So just something to consider as we look at this. If proposed Road B wasn't something that we allowed, those lots would,
You have to divide them differently.
or not divide them at all, or
Yeah.
pull them into,
Add
you
them
know,
to part of the other lot.
Lot 3, or they can leave them separate and someday access them with a new road that goes through Lot 3. I mean, whatever they want to do, they can do, but, yeah, actually, they wouldn't be divided. So. Thanks, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mark Cassoni, third time so far tonight. I want to commend for two people so far before I start. First, at the very beginnings, thank you, Mr. Ross, for disclosure. Appreciate that, and puts the mind back at ease of how things are. And now to Mr. Moakley, reading the bylaws. I was here for the first go-arounds, and I had a little sheet of paper I was reading off of, and I jumped way ahead of what I thought was going on. But what you did, and I asked the town planner, Mrs. Page, she had a page there, and she still has that sheet of paper that I gave her. She still does. It came out of those bylaws. That's where they came from. So you echoed what I jumped ahead at, but you put it in word of what the pages and the words have to say what this is going to happen. To the engineer, is there, once you get done with this part, is there going to be a land walkthrough to update yourself on what you have? Nothing being put up, nothing being broken ground or anything, but are you going to be with surveyors and land walk-ins? Are you going to be up there to walk it again before everything else gets started? That's the question to the engineer. Now, the reason why I'm asking that question is there's a lot of things being said, but if that can be, just like we had the one-time CAP tour, maybe some of the citizens could walk with the engineer and see what's actually going to be there and how you can explain on the grounds itself to work together at the very beginnings when the weather is better to walk with. Because it's easier when you're there than it is to watch it on paper. Last thing. Mr. Gainer's not here. And he's been saying a lot of things. We're saying good things. I am on that same page he is, but I'm also a town citizen that wants to see expansion. And the idea for McGunko Road to expand and work end to end and put mixed stuff there be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Kendall, 25 Olive Street. I apologize I didn't get it to you sooner, but I sent an email. I don't know how many got a chance to read it. I sent it earlier today. So I'd like to read it, and then I have some additional comments as well. I can try to speak into this a little bit more. So I attended the planning board meeting held on January 12th, at which the submission of the new preliminary subdivision plan within the rail transit district was discussed. Like many of the other residents, I left the meeting frustrated. The plan submitted by the applicant is essentially a map of existing conditions with a few additional roads and lot lines drawn. The applicant began the meeting stating that the intent was to get appropriate feedback from the board so they can draw some definitive drawings. However, the applicant refused to answer any material questions about the roads or lot lines depicted on the plan, leaving only a single reason for the submission, that being to freeze the zoning prior to the passage of the rate of development bylaw at passage town meeting. Further, the application submitted contains several material errors and deficiencies. At the meeting, the town planner outlined some of those deficiencies as follows. The book and page references do not reference in all cases the land in question. The plan does not accurately describe who owns the land and who the abutters are. The deed references are incorrect, which may mean that not all easements are shown, which is a requirement. These deficiencies alone should be a grounds to reject the application. Given the deficiencies in the application and the applicant's unwillingness to provide the board with any information upon which they can provide meaningful feedback, I do not understand the board's reluctance to deny the application. I realize town council has indicated that denying the plan may have little to no effect. However, this board denying or rejecting the application, citing the reasons given above, may provide a basis for the town to enforce our zoning in effect at the time of the definitive plan rather than when the preliminary plan was submitted. For the reasons cited above, as well as the overwhelming public sentiment expressed at these and other meetings related to the development of this land, I urge the board to deny or reject this application. Respectfully, Paul Kent. So, I understand that what the town council said, and she's obviously very, very well versed in that. But to elaborate on that, the enforcement of the new bylaw doesn't occur at planning board, but you have the ability to document and cite the deficiencies, provide a basis for that to be enforced, as well as create an artifact for any litigation that might occur. So I urge you to deny this, cite everything that you've said tonight, and I appreciate Mr. Mulkey going through, looking at the tape and providing his comments tonight, and create that documentation. Make it, we have yet to actually stand up to these developers and say, listen, this is unacceptable. To be clear, this developer wrote on the back of a napkin something and shoved it in there without even taking the time to make sure the application was correct. If I did the same things on a dog license, I would get rejected. I couldn't get a license for my dog if I had these many deficiencies, right? So they shouldn't get the zoning frozen and benefit from that. And we should do everything we can to make sure that we're able to enforce our bylaws and also send a message that, we expect more. And just like you said, I completely agree. We need to work with the developers to get the best product, because this is land that, like it or not, I don't like the rail transit district, but it was voted before I was in town, and we have to live with it and make the best of it. So I wholeheartedly agree with that, but we also have to stand up at some point and both send the message and create the documentation and the basis for us to, for the other boards, committees, or individual officials to act. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? All right. My name is Susie Noyes. I live at 18 Williams Road at Ashland, Mass. I am a member of the Ashland Citizens Action Committee, and one of our members couldn't be here today, so I'm going to read a statement on her behalf, Lisa Kaufman from 50 Pine Hill Road. She wrote this yesterday, so. It's ironic how today is the 24-year anniversary of my brother David's passing from a rare form of cancer due to his exposure to the very land that is being discussed tonight. The land that he simply walked across from school to baseball practice. The EPA study that was released in 2006 confirmed that his exposure did indeed cause his cancer. The truth is, this land still remains to be a hazard. To entertain any plan to build on or near this would be careless. Any plan would only benefit a landowner that purchased this toxic wasteland years ago for pennies on the dollar and is only looking for a financial gain. He has strategically waited for people of this town to forget what really took place on this land known as Nyanza. We have not forgotten the young lives that were lost and so many more that continue to struggle with health issues today. We need to learn from our mistakes. We need to find every avenue, run any and all soil and air quality tests there is to confirm what we already know. We need to do this to keep the integrity of this town and know that it's being done to keep every one of our citizens safe, regardless of any other ramifications. We are looking for the Board of Selectmen, the Planning, Conservation, Zoning, and Board of Health to hear our concerns and do everything possible to keep the health of citizens the #1 priority over anything else with this project. Thank you.
All right. Should we go over the draft decision?
I just want to add, we had another email from Virginia Tiber.
Do you want to read it? If it's not.
It's long. Well, it's not that long, but you have a copy
Oh,
of it.
it's the.
Yeah, I didn't. It came in today, this morning.
So we've got a whole bunch of things
Yeah,
here.
I
I'm just
know.
trying to figure
That's
out.
what
Is it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
I can summarize. Well, it can be summarized.
Well, I'll just read it quickly. She writes, I'm writing in opposition to any further development of the rail transit district. The construction currently underway is a monstrosity and an eyesore and has forever changed this area. This is most visible when driving up High Street. Those tremendous large buildings they are building loom over the beautiful old homes and completely destroy any privacy those longtime residents once enjoyed. I often take Amtrak from the Westwood Route 128 station. That is a newish rail transit development area. There is a large single apartment building near the station and some beautiful new retail areas nearby. But that is a much larger train station with Amtrak and commuter rail service. The roads that run through there are 2 lanes each way with many traffic lights. The road there is similar to Route 9 out here. Route 135 can never be widened since many homes line the road. Living here will become a nightmare with this increased level of traffic volume. I'm afraid that the road will be like the Mass Turnpike at rush hour and will ruin this town. Also, the burden on town resources from this development will damage this town and, ultimately, our property values. Overcrowded and underfunded schools will not attract young families to this town. Excessive traffic will repel people. Please don't let this happen. Stop this now. The only person that wants this to continue is Mr. Gaynor, and his motivation is purely financial greed. Thanks for reading this, Virginia Tiber.
KG Narayana from 49 Thomas Road. I have 2 questions. The second question depends on the first question to the board. The emergency access road that they're talking about in this phase, does it also serve the emergency exit for the other project that they've already begun?
There is no new emergency access with on this preliminary plan. The only emergency access that currently exists is the emergency access out of the MBTA parking lot.
No, my question was they're planning to extend the Moganko Road or develop this better. Are they going to connect it to the other side so that people could use as an emergency exit? That's what I'm asking.
That is not on the plan.
That's not on the plan. But if they have recognized there's a need for an emergency exit and they've not provided it for the other plan, are they making any other plan for it now?
Not that they have revealed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the draft decision, as Paul mentioned, there were some potential deficiencies in the original submission, and the first 2 findings do exactly as he suggested and document those. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
Want
looking.
to
Look for my
go over
copy.
those?
Yeah, give me a minute, though.
Honestly, some of this is fairly technical, and I'm not sure I really understand all of this. It's fairly legalese.
I apologize, I don't. Oh, here it is. The findings, is that what?
Yeah, so it's like 1 and 2 were the technical aspects with the,
Yes, so in their application, they need to reference their ownership of the application and reference the book and deeds, the deeds by book and page, and the deeds are, the reference is incorrect. And then further down, they do list on page 6 of the plan set, they list out further deed references to capture all of the land, and many of those are also incorrect.
What you read from is the town attorney's point of view on this.
the document that we have here is a draft decision, which potentially we could vote on tonight. We probably will, potentially with modifications. And the town attorney has reviewed this.
Correct. Correct. What else? So these are proposed findings highlighting the deficiencies of the application is what the first 2 findings are.
These are all very technical, and obviously it's been reviewed by town council for good reason, but beyond these technical deficiencies, is there not room to include some of the other content that has been?
Oh, absolutely.
No, that's 1 and 2.
included?
We've still got 3 through 9,
Okay.
and possibly more that we might add. So. One, the applicant submitted an application executed by R.E. Gaynor, manager Magunko Transit District LLC, for the subdivision of land shown as map 13, lots 138 and 154. The planning board found the title to said land is not sufficiently shown in the reference Middlesex South Registry documents on the application. The book 01259 and page 023 supplied by on the application reference an 1873 deed of land in Somerville. Other land references listed on page 6 are difficult to follow. For example, book 9855, page 403, referenced is for land in Stoneham, and the book 25599, page 526, reference is meeting minutes. Other documents listed on the application, book 63650 and page 0314 shows the transfer of land from Magunko Transit District LLC to Ashland RTD Apartments LLC, executed May 21st, 2014. Lot 154 is owned by Ashland RTD Apartments LLC and not the applicant. That's finding 1. I assume everybody understands that as well as I do. No. Finding 2, in addition, section 344-7A to C of the bylaws lists the preliminary plan submission requirements. The planning board found the submission to be deficient as follows. Section 344-7C2 requires the names of the record owner and the applicant and the name of the designer, engineer, or surveyor. The record of owner of map 13 and lots 138 and 152 are not shown on the plan. Section 344-7C3 requires the names of all abutters and secondary abutters as determined by the most recent local tax list. The record owner of map 13, lot 152 is not provided. Other abutters are not updated to match current tax list. So that's 2. So assume we're just gonna leave those alone
That's
as
fine.
is,
Whatever.
because,
It's technical.
I wouldn't want to touch those without town council reviewing them, and town council has said these are good as is.
Okay.
Unless somebody, so the, proposed finding 3, the board also found that section 344-7C4 requires existing and proposed streets, ways, and easements to be shown. Given the plan references on page 6, there is not a high degree of confidence that all easements are shown. And we talked about easements being one of the potential issues. And now we're getting into the more of the policy type things that, from the planning board standpoint. 4, the proposed extension to Magunko Road requires a waiver due to being a dead-end road longer than 800 feet. The current road already exceeds this limit, and the plans extend the road further. The proposed plans give no indication as to the use of the land, so there is no way to determine the volume and type of traffic to be expected. If the definitive plan does not provide additional information, the planning board would not expect to grant the required waiver. If the definitive plan does provide additional information, the planning board defers the decision on the waiver to the definitive plan process. I wrote that, and town council and staff tweaked it a bit, but is that something that the plan is? Do we understand that? Is that a fair assessment of the planning board's position? Because
That was my position, yes.
Okay. 5, Road A provides additional frontage for lots 5 and 6 with access to the MBTA roadway. There is no information as to how this road will be used. I had originally put some more stuff that town council said didn't really fit, but 6, Road B provides access to frontage for lots 1 and 2 with access to Cherry Street. Cherry Street is a narrow and busy street adjacent to a popular park. The planning board has significant concerns about adding an additional intersection on Cherry Street due to safety and congestion. 7, the planning board is aware that this plan includes the Nyanza Superfund site, and portions of this property have significant restrictions and additional approvals outside the planning board's jurisdiction may be required. And town council stressed that most of the environmental concerns are actually things that are handled outside of the planning board's jurisdiction, but I want to be sure that we had expressed environmental concerns, because to the extent that that's within our jurisdiction, clearly that's an issue for the definitive plan. 8, the planning board has not engaged peer review to analyze the proposed drainage systems and defers any determination of the adequacy, safety, and other concerns to the definitive plan. Anytime they're adding impervious surface with roadways, they have to have drainage systems, and I thought it was important that we document that this is a potential issue, and that we weren't not something that we had addressed in any way at this point. I think that's I think the applicant would agree that at least with that one. And it occurs to me that we may want to add one that Mike brought up, the wetlands. We may want to add a finding of, without the delineation of wetlands, the planning board has not determined whether the lots specified in the preliminary plan are buildable lots.
That's.
Agree.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we probably.
I guess I'm not really delineated.
Yeah, and obviously we probably want, yeah. And I don't think the wetlands have been updated. You know, the Conservation Commission hasn't gone out and checked it, because they change over time. So with any new plan, they usually have to go out and redelineate where the wetlands are. So, and I assume that hasn't happened.
The one comment I have is a little bit technical, but back in the end of 1, so we make the statement that other documents listed on the application show the transfer of land from Magunko Transit District LLC to Ashland RTD Apartments LLC. I'm pretty sure at the end of the last meeting that Mr. Gaynor said that both of those entities are his corporations.
Yes, the point is, it doesn't really matter. It's owned by corporations, and if it's owned by two different corporations,
controlled by him.
It's two different corporations. It doesn't matter if the corporations are owned by the same person. So when it's in, that without, there may be some deficiencies in the documentation
around that. Okay.
That was the point that was bringing up. Yes, I think we all understand Gaynor ultimately controls all of this property at this point. So,
Can we say that finding that you want to add again?
Yes, the wetlands. The wetlands have not been properly delineated, and as such, the planning board cannot determine whether the proposed lots meet the zoning requirements to be buildable lots. So essentially what we're saying is that we have not determined during the preliminary phase whether or not the proposed lots meet the zoning requirements for buildability because of the wetlands. And I would suggest putting that in as condition 9 and bumping 9 down to 10.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to say that the wetland delineation the wetland delineations are not shown. Because there was a lot of conservation work done, and so I don't know the status. But it's not shown on these plans.
And then
the other one I think I mentioned that I'd like to see at least made reference to is there's no alternative access on the north side of the RTD still identified. So there's no continuous egress other than a one-way MBTA access road, right? Even with the proposed roads being proposed, we had clearly stated along the first review of the site plan that was approved that we needed to see a secondary egress to the property, and there's still, one has not been identified. Do you think it's appropriate for the condition here? If you don't, that's fine. I mean, certainly he's recorded it and he understands my concern, but.
Yeah, no.
I'm not sure on that.
Okay.
But I'm not, because as was expressed, I think Joel brought up that, we need to look at, if we create a cut through, what's that going to do to the traffic through downtown? We have to really.
It's got to be somewhere. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying the board is saying be innovative, be creative, find another way in and out of the property that will minimize the impact, right? No matter what you do, there will be an impact either. Yeah, it can't all be at West Union Street. It can't all be at that corner. So you're going to have to find, as we develop this, or as the developer looks to develop this land, there's going to have to be another way to connect through this property. Right now, it's a 160-acre box with one way in, one way out on a road that was, shrunk down to 2 lanes. I have considerable concerns about that.
Yeah, I as well.
I expressed them last time. They weren't addressed this time. I still have the same concern.
Yeah. I mean, right now they're shrinking that road, which is going to add sidewalks, but it's going to make whatever goes on here harder, so.
If it's not appropriate for this
Oh,
condition, I'm
could-
fine with it.
We could put it in as a finding. The planning board has concerns about the lack of an additional means of egress from the MBTA road besides the
West Union Street.
West Union Street
Entrance, yeah.
entrance.
I don't want to define where it has to be or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You have future plans to show the greenway? Or no?
I don't know that I want to put that in. Obviously, it is something I want to see happen. We have a consulting company that's working on a master plan, so hopefully we'll get some better ideas soon as to where they would think that would work well. And then the final finding that I wrote was, in summary, the planning board finds that the preliminary plan lacks sufficient detail to approve any of the new roadways. A definitive plan of similar nature would be denied. And as such, I directed the planning director to write up this decision saying that the board had voted to disapprove the application. 'Cause I think that's what people want to do. I told her to say 4-0 because I didn't know you were going to get your affidavit in. So that's obviously going to have to change based on whatever the actual vote total is tonight.
Do you want to say some finding in reference to how it's unclear how these proposed lot lines meet the spirit of the purpose of the rail trail?
That's what I was just gonna mention. To me, it almost seems like, especially with these two small lots, they're coming off of Cherry, they're not even associated with the, that's completely
That would be a great
out of the
point.
district
Yeah.
almost. I know it's a big area and it's far away,
Crossed
but
out.
it seems like there could be a better way to get everything into that district rather than, it seems like whatever you're gonna put there on Cherry Street is gonna be like a whole separate development than this, because it's not really gonna have anything to do with the transit.
So Sheila, I think the way you said it was pretty good. Maybe we just referenced the spirit of the bylaw.
Yeah,
What's
the number?
The purpose.
It's
right in the-
8.4.1.
Yeah, it's
Purpose.
essentially the
Defined
purpose, right? Not in line with the purpose of the spirit of the bylaw.
And from a content perspective, the purpose and intent of this district was to have a mix of different things, not just residential. And if we look at what's already been developed, we already have a lot of residential. So I think, I understand the zones, the areas according to the use map allow for additional residential, but I think, certainly looking for other innovative ideas in terms of what can go here. I don't think it needs to go in the decision, but.
So, did you get that down as another?
Yeah, and the wording is not quite right, but due to the, what was the word you used now?
The spirit
Disconnected?
of the,
Well, due to the disconnected nature of the
Yeah.
plan,
yeah, that's what,
the planning board finds the proposed layout doesn't fit the spirit of the rail trail.
Rail
Rail transit district,
As defined
and then
in-
reference the bylaw.
Outlined at
8.4.1.
8.4.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll have to flush that a little bit. Okay,
So I believe.
so we have
that-
3 new ones.
Yes.
Okay.
So we would,
At the vote as well,
Yeah.
depending on what it is. I
Right.
feel like that shouldn't be in there until the vote takes place, so.
Right.
the thought was if we didn't end up having any changes, we could vote and then just sign. But that's why.
Right. That's all right, you can.
Mr. Chairman, could I do a point of order?
Sure.
It's a procedural point of order. I just want to ask, just before you do take the vote, at the very, very beginnings of the meetings, you said whatever decision you make as a board, what does that do to procedure?
Yes, procedurally what will happen is the board, I've actually been advised that taking no action is not something that is specified under the Mass General laws on preliminary plans, that we need to either approve or disapprove. I believe taking no action would be a constructive approval.
Correct.
So,
That's, yeah.
so taking no action is an approval. And so we would vote to approve or disapprove. But essentially, a preliminary plan is advisory for the definitive plan. So it gives the developer a good understanding of where the planning board is, but whether we approve or disapprove, the procedure going forward is the exact same. So we simply are documenting where we are at this stage, what we think of the plan, and that's really what we're doing.
And without asking which way you're going, which is purely board decision, disapprove or approve, or take no action at all, is this going to still be where it is now? And does it come back for another agenda time?
Probably what will happen is we'll finish this tonight. We had an extension on the time to consider it that runs out next week, so we need to take a vote and file a decision, because I don't think the applicant wants to give us more time, and I think we've really done all we can do based on the level of detail that we have. So I don't think it would do the town any good or the applicant any good to spend more time on this. What will then happen, presumably the applicant is intending to come back with a definitive plan sometime probably in May or June, based on their 7-month timeline from the submission of the preliminary plan. And at that time, it's a brand new process. It's a public hearing process, meaning there's legal advertising and such that's required for that. And we would go into much more depth on that. We would have peer review of all the engineering, look very closely at the drainage, look at all the traffic, and all the other things associated with this, and go into much more detail.
Okay, before all that would be tonight's decision, either way, up or down, whatever. I'm probably not exactly great on this part, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Would the engineer get to say something before you make your vote?
If the applicant wants to say more, he's perfectly welcome to come up to the microphone, and I'll recognize him, and he can say more.
But
It's his
I'm
discretion.
just saying, before you do take the vote, you may have a chance to hear what he heard from you as a board, and just take it as all in at one time.
The applicant is sitting right there, and he can come up and talk if he feels he needs to talk. He can sit there and watch if that's what he chooses to do.
So, yeah, let's just, so as to give the chance on your side to say something on the last time for your side for tonight, before they take the votes, so people, you could be heard in public again.
Yeah.
Being fair.
Do you have anything you want to say before we come to a vote?
Perfectly comfortable. Mark, thank you for setting the stage. I don't have very much to add. I mean, it's pretty clear based on the preliminary findings that were submitted and the draft decision that's going around. Certainly, we don't agree with a number of the concepts that you're acting under. Certainly the review is for a preliminary subdivision plan and does not entail all of the scrutiny that a standard definitive would. But you certainly are acting within your purview to render a decision with conditions and concerns, as you're so noting. And then the obligation is on us to then take that information and factor it into the final set of plans. So we'll certainly review your comments in great detail. As I mentioned at the onset a couple of weeks ago, we do want this to be a communicative process with the town planner and obviously the board. Our goals here are not to try to shove anything down the town's throat. It's to develop the land in accordance with the agreements that have been made on it. I know folks here really don't want to see development on the parcel, but that's not really what's on the table here. That's not what we're discussing, nor should the board be discussing, nor should it be discussing the effects of what development can have on the land. Again, it really simply is a matter of how the lot lines conform with the zoning requirements that are enumerated in the bylaw and as we've shown on the plan. I certainly can't speak in great detail to technical conditions 1 and 2 in that we have not provided a direct response to them, but we're certainly aware of them through Sheila's comments from last week. And Mr. Gaynor did provide commentary in that he is the legal owner of all of the lots on this parcel and that his master LLC owns the subsidiary LLCs that this application was made under. So while I don't agree wholly to the findings that we're making, I certainly have to respect that you're making them, and we'll work towards revising as we move forward to the definitive. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. So I believe the order of business would be to vote to reach a conclusion on this, and so what is the, just so we do this right, do you know what the proper motion is? I believe the decision of the board, the inclination of the motion would be to deny to issue a denial for the plan with the condition, with the findings as drafted with the additions as discussed.
That's tonight, yeah.
Just to be very clear, so does a yes vote on this say we agree and disapprove the plan?
If the motion is deny, then a yes vote is to deny. Yes.
Okay.
So.
Yes, I think, somebody needs to make a motion, and you can, in that motion, include this decision as
to deny the
edited
preliminary
tonight.
plan with those conditions and additions we added today.
Second.
All right. All in favor of denying the preliminary subdivision plan?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is 5-0. So that would change on the front. Yeah,
Right
you
here.
got that note.
Yeah.
All right. And town council advised that we would be that we can also vote to designate the chair sign the decision on behalf of the board, which would save all of us having to come into town hall next week to sign this.
Yeah, because it'll be tight.
Make a motion that we allow the chairman to sign for us on this decision.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes 5-0. So.
Who seconded that one?
John.
Okay.
Okay.
Find
So
something else to do next week.
that
On the same
concludes the Rail Transit District portion of our meeting. The next item of business is the Upper Charles Trail Master Plan Mitigation Funds. As most of us will recall, we have two sets of mitigation funds for trails. One is from the Village of the Americas, and the other is from the apartments for the Rail Transit District. The Upper Charles Trail Committee went through an RFP process to find an engineering firm to help the town develop a master plan for the trail through town. And the whole process took a lot longer than the committee would have liked. As you all know, I'm a member of that committee. But we've had 4 different companies bid on the project, and we selected one, which I don't know if the town has signed the contract yet.
Nope, this vote will, to use the money.
The company is Alta.
Get that going.
And they had a good proposal going through a number of public forums, looking at different routing options, and coming up with a master plan for where this multi-use trail through town should go. And I believe the total price on that on their bid was it 68,000? 67,000. Okay. And what the committee would like from the planning board is the planning board to authorize the use of those funds towards this contract up to $67,000.
They're both in the same fund, so it doesn't matter, or does it have to come from one or the other?
I believe they are 2 separate amounts, and the one for Village of the Americas, there was an upfront amount, and then there was an additional amount that gets paid in as occupancy permits are issued. And then the Rail Transit District, the wording was a little vague, but it encouraged it for trails within the Rail Transit District, which at least the draft proposal has the trail going through there. So they would certainly be looking at that as part of the process.
And these are both of these are earmarked or whatever for that specific, just for the trail.
For
It's
bike
not
path.
for a variety of things.
They are specifically for trails, not
Okay.
necessarily the Upper Charles Trail, but that is the one trail that the town is currently actively pursuing. So, in fact, that was the trail that
I think they're
led to
specified to
this.
this trail, though. I don't think they're to be used on nature trails or any other trails. I think they were specifically.
It was intended for this.
Yeah, it was intended for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the use.
And it wasn't a fund that was for the trails and this and that or any other, this is specifically just for this, right?
And my suggestion would be to authorize $67,000 from these 2 sources of mitigation funds, but not specify how the money is taken between the 2, and let staff
Financial
work out
guys or whatever.
what makes the most sense, because I don't see a big concern.
That makes sense.
It's gonna.
Unless somebody else has a concern.
My preference would be to see them be one fund. I mean, if you have to drain one fund and then you only have one after that, that would be my preference. I think there's 32,500 or so in one of the funds.
We have 33,000 in one. They're actually in the same account. So
Oh, they are.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
And then-
Yeah.
Okay.
So 33,000 and then 33,800.
So there's enough in there to cover this?
It sounds like we're 200 short,
Short.
but that'll,
Vote to write a bounce check.
Right.
See, wait a minute, there's some people out here too.
you know.
Right.
I'll authorize up to 67. Can't pay it, but.
Yeah, well, we may have an occupancy permit come in by the time the contract.
So we're gonna authorize them to
completed.
use that money for that, and as long as
Yes.
it's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's in there, so.
The payment terms.
Mark, are you talking on this topic?
Yes, I am.
Is there anything, are we taking public comment?
We aren't required to, but I like taking public comment anytime someone from the public wants to comment, so I will recognize Mark.
And you said that anybody else have a concern, you said. With that, it's up to him. Mr. O'Brien, would you like to come up here? I got a question for you that needs to be said in public.
Okay. Yes, sir.
First of all, I do know that you're on that same bike committee that Preston's on.
Yeah, Joel is the chair.
The concern, what input does Preston put into your group to ask for that money to come up to the planning board?
Joel Arbeitman, Chair of the Ashland Upper Charles Trail Committee. A couple of responses to that. First, I just want to remind the board that when we brought up our interest in pursuing bringing a consultant on board, we were given a sense of the board go-ahead that, barring any oddities, that there was an expectation. So Preston was not the only member of the board to vote on this. The full board voted on it at that time. So we had the understanding that we could proceed, with all due diligence and pursue this contract. Secondly, just because somebody's on our committee doesn't mean they support. They could be voting against this. I mean, there's not a conflict of interest there, and that's certainly not self-serving of any member to profit from this. Preston, like any other member on this committee, is a volunteer looking at what's best for the town and the residents. And whether he has personal interests or he likes to ride bicycles, and you also referred to it as a bike trail or a bike committee, this is a multi-use path. This is a way that students can get to school walking. This is a way that people can take their dogs out and get some exercise. This is a way that skateboarders, we've had all kinds of problems with skate parks, can get out and get some exercise. This is a trail that's for everybody. It's not whether Preston is a bicycle rider. That's really not the issue here at all. So, I just think, it's always appropriate to raise whether somebody might have a bias or something. That really isn't the case in this situation. We're all trying to do the best we can for all the residents and not just build bicycle trails or just, have one narrow segment of the community who would benefit from this. Anyway, I hope that answers the question.
Answers it. And on my side, probably was the why bring it up, and why was it asked for monies through a different board, not as a representative. That was my only idea why I was asking that question. Yes, it did come. I asked you, President, one time that you're on this committee. I asked the same thing as with Mr. Rossi about the RTD. A little bit of conflict of what a purpose is for it. But an outside person may not know you're on these committees unless they understand those committees are for use of the town. Understanding that the townspeople have transportation, so they want to get out there. Only reason why I'm bringing it up is the next time, Preston, disclose that you're on that meeting before you read the agenda out.
I thought I mentioned it. You did? Okay.
Actually, the chair did, Mark. He did earlier in the meeting, so. Steve Mitchell, from the Board of Selectmen, not speaking on behalf of the board. I completely agree with Joel's assessment. I think certainly the Board of Selectmen is behind the Upper Charles River Trail, and it's a committee of the Board of Selectmen. So my issue that I raise is more of a process issue. The first time I've heard of this request was reading the agenda tonight. And I'm not disputing the fact that the planning board holds the funds and dispenses the funds. I guess my My issue is more procedural with the fact that I think that the request should have come before the board to then come before the planning board. And I think that's the proper process here. And again, not, hearing about it, being here tonight, reading an agenda, I don't think is the correct way, certainly for a board that has appointed a committee, and I think relative to citizens as well. I don't know how many people watch planning board meetings. I suspect a lot more watch Board of Selectmen's meetings. No offense, but I think that's just the reality of it. So that's my concern about what we're discussing right now. So, thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get in between a jurisdictional dispute between two other, the selectmen and some other committee. It's not really, for sitting here as a member of the planning board, that's not really where I want to be. I'm also a member of the Upper Charles Trail Committee, so it kind of...
And I don't have an issue with,
So,
I don't have a share of Mark's concerns about
Yeah.
you being a member and also
Yeah.
being part of the planning board.
But,
We're all
as
members.
Mark mentioned, it is important that I be very clear
Absolutely.
that I fill two roles here.
Which you did, and I think we all try to
Yeah.
do that. But that was, and I'm not trying to make a territorial dispute here, but again, I think that is the right process and procedure. I thought I would bring it up.
Yeah, I know the process, speaking as a trail committee member, I know the process for going through the RFP and all of that has been, has heavily involved town staff with the town manager and the assistant town manager. And I know one member of the committee is also a member of the Board of Selectmen. So if there's a lack of communication there, that's unfortunate.
Well, I to go to that point, the Board of Selectmen did discuss and vote on pursuing the RFP. And I just think this is very similar to, in that same procedural vein. So, do what you want to do. I'm just bringing up my particular concern.
What does the board want to do?
Well, are we deciding this because we control the money?
Yes.
I mean, the money was for the stated purpose, was it not?
Mm-hmm.
And we had an initial conversation with Joel about this topic at least 4 or 5 months ago, if not, right, September, somewhere in that time frame. So, I mean, I think, from my perspective, I think we want to get on with trying to do this trail, and I think it's in the best interest of the town. With all due respect for the concerns raised, I think we should vote. Vote.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the transfer of money to
The expenditure.
the expenditure of this money to fund this consulting study in regards to the Upper Charles Rail Trail.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0. And I would suggest that the chair of the committee talk to the selectmen about this and make sure that any communications issues are ironed out. To be sure. So, is there, I believe that is we've come to the end of our agenda.
Yeah, although there was one item that you had mentioned, just a quick update of ZBA.
Oh, yes.
Do we want to do that? So,
I had mentioned that it would be nice if we had a little bit better communication, just for awareness, between the planning board and the ZBA as to what's going on.
yep, so sort of to aid that, we'll present you all with the agenda for their upcoming meeting, so you kind of know what's going on. So their next meeting is February 7th. There is an appeal of a building inspector's decision at 23 Washington. It actually opened officially Tuesday night, the 24th, but due to scheduling, it just was opened and continued to February 7th. So the substance of that hearing will start on February 7th. And then also, it's 125 Union Street. They have been before this board and the planning board in the past several months. They have another variance. They have a couple variances to get and a special permit, a variance for a sign, a variance for the new canopy is going to overhang the front setback. They have two fronts because they're on a corner. And, so they have two-dimensional variances and then a special permit to modify a pre-existing non-conforming lighted sign. So that's before the planning board February 7th, and that should conclude all their, yes, ZBA, and that should conclude all of their permitting so they can get started.
Okay. And I don't know if the board has been apprised. I was talking about with staff about staffing, and what they had worked out was that Sheila will be attending the planning board meetings as the planning director, and Josh will be attending the ZBA meetings as the assistant planning director, so we don't have all of the staff people busy every night of the week.
Right.
So that's what they had worked out, and so if anybody has concerns about that, we can talk about it or whatever.
Yeah, on busy nights, Josh might join us, though, as well, to help out the projects, to keep them moving.
I also see minutes for January 12th.
Yes.
You want to take care of these before we adjourn?
Second page, line 6. I don't recall making this asking about stormwater runoff. I was asking more about, I think, trees and something along those lines. So if you
Okay.
want to just strike it, I'm fine with that. But I thought my line of questioning was more along the lines of the amount of trees that would have to be cut down.
Right. You want me to change it to the trees or strike it?
You can change it to the trees.
Yeah.
Here it's included.
As of the
Thank
proposed
you.
increase, grading would cause more trees to be removed.
What if, yeah,
I already read them.
and then just,
Read them on the line.
yeah.
Did my homework. You make faces and everyone else.
ask our legislators to change the state open meeting law to allow us to approve minutes by email. Make these meetings a little less boring and make it easier to get minutes approved in a more timely fashion.
You get more words.
More what?
Another can of worms.
Although you
Yeah.
guys can always send me, like, typo edits.
Yeah.
I think you still got to vote, and you can't vote on email.
Can if the state law has changed.
Not this state law. Not this state law. We're still blue here.
Move that we approve the minutes from.
Can you wait 30 seconds more?
He's messing with me.
Set you up for that one.
You guys are speed readers, apparently.
Yeah, I started about 3 days ago. Reading them.
There you go. Okay, I'm good.
All right, I move that we approve the minutes from
January 12th?
January 12th with
2017.
the slight
correction.
modification, correction that Sheila made.
For a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0.
4-0, I abstained.
Oh, 4-0.
I
Okay.
wasn't-
All right.
Sorry.
I know
Let's call abstentions. That passes 4-0-1. All right. Are there any member reports or other items to discuss before we adjourn?
Just one question. I know last meeting I saw, and I read it in the minutes, how you had asked about zoning bylaw changes.
Yeah.
Would you prefer them be submitted, or things that we want to talk about? How do you, I mean, I don't want to get into them tonight,
Yeah,
certainly,
I
but
think-
if I notice things.
Yes, submit them to me, and then we'll compile a plan that will
Okay.
hash
All right,
out
I
in the
can-
public meeting.
I'll
I
submit
think we
them via
can
email, and you can put an
compile a
agenda together
list.
with the chair and present any concerns I might have.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be very helpful.
All right.
I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting at 10:02.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you for being with us, and good night.